October 23, 1944. Mabalacat Airfield, Luzon, Philippines. Lieutenant Yukio Seki stood in the briefing room staring at an aerial reconnaissance photograph that had been captured from a downed American aircraft 3 days earlier. The image showed the Kaiser shipyards in Richmond, California, taken from 15,000 feet. Seki counted the vessels visible in the frame. 47 escort carriers in various stages of construction, lined up in neat rows like toys in a factory. Some were mere keels. Others were nearly complete, their flight decks already installed. The photograph's date stamp read September 1944. Vice Admiral Takejiro Onishi, who had just asked Seki to lead the first official Kamikaze attack unit, noticed his silence. "What troubles you, Lieutenant?" Seki pointed at the photograph. "Sir, our intelligence reports indicated America possessed approximately 30 escort carriers total. This single photograph shows 47 under construction in one location. How many shipyards does America operate?" Onishi's face darkened. "That photograph was classified. You should not have seen it." "But I have seen it, sir." "And now I must ask, if one shipyard can build this many carriers, and if my mission tomorrow successfully sinks one escort carrier, how long until it is replaced?" The question hung in the air. Onishi finally answered, 63 days. American shipyards can build an escort carrier from keel to launch in approximately 2 months. Seki did a calculation that would haunt him through his final 48 hours of life. If one kamikaze pilot could, with extraordinary luck, sink one escort carrier, and if America could replace that carrier in 2 months, then Japan would need to kill more kamikaze pilots per month than she could train, flying aircraft faster than she could build them, against targets that multiplied faster than she could sink them. The mathematics of the kamikaze program, when confronted with American industrial capacity, became an equation with no solution except endless Japanese deaths achieving nothing. He wrote in his final letter to his wife, which she received 3 weeks after his death, "I fly tomorrow to strike the enemy with my life. We are told this is a glorious sacrifice that will save Japan. But I have seen photographs of American shipyards. They build ships faster than we can sink them. They replace aircraft faster than we can destroy them. I die not because my death will change the war's outcome, but because refusing orders would shame my family. I am not a hero. I am a product of an empire that demands death because it cannot produce victory." The kamikaze concept emerged from Japan's desperation after the Battle of the Philippine Sea in June 1944, where Japanese naval aviation had been systematically destroyed. Admiral Onishi proposed organized suicide attacks in October 1944, arguing that conventional tactics had become futile. If pilots who would likely die anyway deliberately crashed into enemy ships, success rates might approach 50% compared to the 2 to 5% hit rates of conventional bombing attacks. The mathematics seemed sound in isolation. One pilot, one obsolete aircraft, one bomb could potentially sink an American warship worth millions of dollars and carrying hundreds of sailors. Japan's remaining 10,000 aircraft, if used as kamikaze weapons, might sink 5,000 American ships, making invasion impossible. The calculation assumed that American ship production could not keep pace with kamikaze destruction rates. This assumption was catastrophically wrong. By October 1944, American shipyards had achieved production rates that Japanese military planners considered impossible. The Kaiser shipyards alone, just one of dozens of American naval construction facilities, had perfected assembly line techniques that reduced escort carrier construction time from 18 months in 1941 to 63 days in 1944. Henry Kaiser's workforce of 90,000 laborers, working 3 shifts around the clock, produced 1 escort carrier every 2 weeks at peak production. The numbers were staggering. From 1941 to 1945, American shipyards would produce 122 escort carriers, 27 fleet carriers, 349 destroyers, 498 destroyer escorts, and hundreds of other warships. Japanese shipyards, devastated by American submarine warfare cutting off steel supplies and bombed repeatedly by B-29s, managed to complete exactly 0 fleet carriers after 1944 and only a handful of smaller vessels. Ensign Teruo Yamaguchi, a kamikaze pilot who survived the war after his mission was canceled due to mechanical failure, described learning these statistics in a 1987 interview. We were told that our sacrifice would sink enough American ships to force them to negotiate peace. We believed this because our commanders told us it was true. But some pilots had access to intelligence reports or captured documents. We learned that America was building ships faster than we could possibly sink them, even if every kamikaze succeeded. I remember one pilot, I will not name him, who did mathematics in his bunk the night before his mission. He calculated that if every kamikaze attack succeeded perfectly, which never happened, and if every aircraft Japan possessed was used as a kamikaze, which was impossible, we might sink 3,000 American ships. Then he showed us a captured American newspaper from July 1944 that listed ship production: 2,654 major warships completed, with another 3,000 under construction. We had already lost the arithmetic before the first kamikaze flew. The Lady Gulf kamikaze attacks in October 1944 appeared to validate the tactic. On October 25th, kamikaze strikes sank the escort carrier USS St. Lo and damaged 5 other carriers. The success rate exceeded 30%, far better than conventional attacks. Japanese command celebrated these results as proof that kamikaze tactics could win the war. What they didn't publicize was that the 5 damaged carriers were back in service within weeks, repaired by mobile maintenance ships that accompanied the fleet. The St. Lo's loss was replaced within 47 days when USS Makassar Strait completed construction at Kaiser shipyards. For every kamikaze success, American industrial capacity delivered replacement vessels faster than Japanese training programs could replace pilots. Flight Petty Officer Hajime Fuji, who flew 3 kamikaze escort missions before the war ended, described the growing awareness among pilots. After each mission, we would hear reports of successful attacks. So many ships sunk, so many damaged. We celebrated these victories. But then we would see American fleets that seemed to grow larger, not smaller. More carriers, more destroyers, more aircraft. We began to understand that we were fighting not just the American Navy, but American factories. And factories do not fear death. The most devastating revelation came from American prisoner interrogations that were secretly shared among kamikaze units. American sailors, when questioned about ship losses, would casually mention that damaged vessels were quickly repaired and sunken ships rapidly replaced. One captured American naval officer, interrogated after the sinking of USS Princeton in October 1944, told his questioners, "You can sink every carrier in Task Force 38, and we'll have replacements within 3 months. Kaiser's shipyards produce carriers faster than you can train pilots to crash into them." This statement, initially dismissed as propaganda, proved accurate. By December 1944, Japanese intelligence confirmed that American escort carrier production had actually accelerated. The photograph that Lieutenant Seki had seen was one of several reconnaissance images taken by long-range Japanese patrol aircraft that had survived missions over American West Coast shipyards. These photographs, classified as top secret by Japanese command, showed industrial capacity that rendered the Kamikaze program strategically meaningless. Commander Rikihei Inoguchi, who helped organize Kamikaze tactics, wrote after the war about the intelligence suppression. "We knew by January 1945 that American ship production exceeded our ability to sink vessels, even if every kamikaze succeeded. But this information was withheld from pilots because it would destroy morale. We asked young men to die for certain success, while knowing their deaths would achieve nothing strategically. This was not warfare. This was murder disguised as honor." The mathematics became undeniable during the Okinawa campaign from April to June 1945. Operation Kikusui, 10 massive coordinated kamikaze attacks, expended approximately 1,900 aircraft in suicide missions. These attacks sank 36 American ships and damaged 368 others, inflicting 4,907 American deaths in the Navy's bloodiest battle. The casualties seem to validate kamikaze effectiveness, but American industrial response rendered these losses tactical rather than strategic. Damaged ships were repaired using mobile maintenance facilities that accompanied the fleet. Sunken vessels were replaced by new construction that exceeded losses. By July 1945, the American Fifth Fleet at Okinawa was larger than when the battle began, despite losing 36 ships. Japan had expended 1,900 aircraft and pilots, resources that could not be replaced, to achieve temporary damage against an enemy whose industrial capacity made the losses irrelevant. Flight Warrant Officer Kiyoshi Ogawa, who successfully crashed into USS Bunker Hill on May 11, 1945, killing 393 American sailors, left a final letter describing his understanding of the mission's futility. "I am told my attack will damage American morale and perhaps sink a carrier. But I have seen intelligence estimates. America builds faster than we destroy. My death tomorrow will be recorded as a victory. But victory measured against what? If 10,000 kamikaze pilots each sink one ship, America will build 10,000 replacements while Japan builds nothing. I died knowing my sacrifice is strategically meaningless. But I die because refusing orders would shame my family more than dying for a lost cause." The industrial disparity extended beyond ships to the aircraft carrying the kamikaze pilots. By 1945, Japan was using obsolete fighters, trainers, and even biplanes for suicide missions because modern aircraft production had collapsed under American bombing. Pilots flew Mitsubishi A6M0s that were technically obsolete by 1943. Nakajima, B-5N torpedo bombers that were easy targets for American fighters, and Yokosuka D-4Y dive bombers that lacked the speed to penetrate modern defenses. Meanwhile, American factories produced aircraft at rates that Japanese intelligence considered impossible. Consolidated's Fort Worth plant built 3,034 B-24 bombers in 1944 alone. Boeing's Seattle facility produced 362 B-29 Superfortresses. Douglas Aircraft manufactured 5,445 C-47 transport planes. Grumman delivered 2,545 F-6F Hellcat fighters. The total, over 96,000 American aircraft produced in 1944, compared to Japan's entire war production of approximately 76,000 aircraft from 1941 to 1942-1945. Petty Officer Isao Matsuo, who died in a kamikaze attack off Okinawa, left a diary that included his reaction to captured American production statistics. We are told that our spirit will overcome American material advantages. But I have seen the numbers. One American factory produces more aircraft in a month than our entire nation produces in a year. How does spirit defeat mathematics? I fly tomorrow knowing that my death will statistically accomplish nothing. For every plane I destroy with my crash, America builds 5 more. This is not warfare. This is suicide against infinity. The proximity fuse technology described in earlier sections made kamikaze attacks even more futile. By 1945, American ships carried VT-fused ammunition that created walls of exploding shells through which kamikaze aircraft had to fly. The success rate dropped from 30% in October 1944 to below 15% by June 1945. Pilots increasingly died without even reaching their targets. Shot down by defenses their commanders had assured them could be penetrated through determination and sacrifice. The most tragic aspect was that senior Japanese commanders understood the mathematical futility by early 1945, but continued ordering kamikaze attacks anyway. Admiral Matomo Ugaki, commander of kamikaze operations, wrote in his diary on April 12, 1945, "We have expended 600 aircraft in the last week. American fleet continues to operate normally. Intelligence reports indicate they have already replaced damaged vessels. Kamikaze tactics achieve tactical results, but fail strategically. Yet we have no alternative. Conventional attacks achieve nothing. Kamikaze attacks achieve little. But little is more than nothing." This coldly pragmatic assessment condemned thousands of young pilots to deaths their commanders knew were strategically meaningless. The kamikaze program continued not because it could win the war, but because Japanese military culture could not admit defeat. Young men died to preserve the honor of a command structure that had lost the ability to achieve military objectives. Warrant Officer Takeshi Kosai, who survived 3 kamikaze escort missions, described the growing cynicism among pilots. By May 1945, everyone understood we were dying for nothing. New pilots would arrive with patriotic speeches about saving Japan. Veterans would show them photographs of American shipyards, captured production statistics, intelligence estimates. The new pilots' faces would change. Understanding would replace enthusiasm, but they flew anyway. Refusing orders meant court-martial and family shame. Dying uselessly somehow seemed more honorable than living as a coward. Japan had created a system where meaningless death was preferable to shameful survival. The atomic bombings of Hiroshima and Nagasaki in August 1945 ended the war before the planned Operation Ketsugo, which would have expended Japan's remaining 10,000 aircraft in kamikaze attacks against invasion fleets. American planners, aware of these reserves, had prepared overwhelming defenses. The invasion fleet would have carried over 1 million VT-fused anti-aircraft shells, supported by hundreds of radar-equipped fighters and the most sophisticated fleet defenses ever assembled. Japanese military analysis conducted after surrender calculated that Operation Ketsugo would have achieved less than 5% success rates, killing 10,000 pilots to sink perhaps 500 ships that American industry would have replaced within 3 months. The Kamikaze program ultimately expended approximately 3,800 pilots who conducted organized suicide attacks, plus thousands more in improvised crashes. These attacks sank 47 Allied ships and damaged over 300 others, killing approximately 7,000 Allied personnel. The tactical achievement was real. The strategic impact was nil. American industrial capacity rendered every loss temporary. Japanese industrial collapse rendered every pilot's death permanent. Flight Petty Officer Hachiro Hosokawa, one of the few kamikaze pilots who survived the war after mechanical failure forced him to abort his final mission, spoke at a 1995 memorial service. "We were told we were divine wind, that our sacrifice would save Japan. But we were not divine. We were young men sent to die by commanders who understood our deaths would accomplish nothing strategically. The greatest tragedy was not that we died, but that we died knowing our deaths were futile. American industrial might had already won the war. We were simply the final victims of commanders who could not admit defeat." The mathematics that doomed the kamikaze program can be summarized in stark numbers. Japan expended 3,800 suicide pilots flying aircraft from an industrial base that produced 76,000 planes during the entire war, attempting to sink ships from a navy supported by shipyards that produced over 500 major warships after Pearl Harbor. American factories replaced losses faster than kamikaze attacks could inflict them. Japanese training programs could not replace pilots at rates required to maintain attack tempo. The industrial disparity meant that even perfect kamikaze success, every pilot sinking one ship, would have failed strategically because American production would simply build more ships than Japan had pilots.